My name is Shannon Reed. I've been a wrestling fan since the mid-1980s. I consider myself a casual historian. I'm also a professional wrestler. This podcast is dedicated to wrestling's glory days. I'm talking about the NWA, Mid-South Wrestling, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and more. Maybe you want to get extreme with ECW. Well, you can do it all right here on this podcast because we're going to have something for everybody. And yeah, we'll talk about modern wrestling as well. So tune in right here on Read This with Shannon Reed. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to the second episode of Read This with Shannon Reed, a classic wrestling podcast. I hope everybody enjoyed the first episode I did with the Kingpin Angel Medina. I have another special guest today. He's an old friend of mine and he's one of wrestling's most noted historians, Graham Cawthon. Graham is the owner and founder of the historyofwwe.com website, which is the premier website that is available if you're ever looking for results of a show from WWE or WCW over the last 40, 50 years. You can go and find the results of any show. If you went to a show when you were a kid and you don't remember what all the matches were, you want to go to the historyofwwe.com or check out one of his many books. Graham, like I said, is an old friend of mine, and we ended up talking for a lot longer than I anticipated, probably because we hadn't been able to catch up in so long. We talked for almost 4 hours. So as a result, this episode is going to be broken into two parts, and this is part one. So in part one, we're going to discuss some of our favorite live event memories of shows that we've attended in the past. And we're going to talk about a lot more as well. So I hope you enjoy part one, and I hope you'll stay tuned for part two, which will be released here soon. So without any further ado, here's episode 2 of the Read This podcast with Graham Cawthon. Hello everybody, welcome to Read This with Shannon Reed. I got a very special guest today from the historyofwwe.com, Graham Cawthon. Welcome, Graham.
What's up, Shannon? How are you? I haven't seen you in years.
I think the last time that we saw each other was when I came to Charlotte and we went to that one independent show that Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan were on.
That was an amazing experience that we probably paid next to nothing for.
Right. I always remember because one of the big selling points for me was they said you can get your picture with the Rock and Roll Express and the Midnight Express together, and like that had never happened before. And so I get there, and of course they had forgotten all about that apparently, and they had them doing separate photo ops. So that was unfortunate, but it was a fun time.
And that was the closest to that point I had ever been to Hulk. So, I
Yeah,
mean, also it's at a high school.
right. And I remember taking a picture of Hulk getting like a hot dog. He was making a hot dog, and I snapped a photo of it. And
I remember I
yeah,
brought my I brought my WrestleMania 3 poster just in the off chance that I might be close to him. And so he's walking down the hallway. He's on his phone. I don't think he's talking to anyone, right? I think he's doing like the Raw general manager bit where he's like, "Yeah, brother, I'm psyched. I'm here in Charlotte," just so he can make an appearance but not actually have to interact with anyone.
right. And then his phone died, so he just pretended to make a hot dog in front of us, so we wouldn't bother him. But yeah, we've known each other for it's got to be close to 20 years now, like pretty close.
It was the '05 Fan Fest. And I remember that because that's where I met like half my best friends. I met Brad Stutz that weekend. I met Mike Johnson that weekend. Just like a whole bunch of the FanFest crowd. Like that was the big weekend. Like I can't imagine my life if I didn't go that weekend.
Those were amazing times. I didn't realize the '05 one was your first one because
It, it wasn't. I went to the one the year before that was the Super Bowl weekend, the first one.
yeah,
And then I went to the one that August. It would be August '04 in Fayetteville.
right. And then my first one was that Thanksgiving of '04 in Charlotte. And so if we met in '05, it was probably that following summer at the '05 Fan Fest. And
Mhm.
were you at the Thanksgiving '04 one?
No, that's the only one from the early ones that I skipped.
Gotcha. Man, those were just some awesome times, and
They
I don't,
were.
yeah, I don't think, I knew at the time like how special it was, but so many of the like the guys that were a part of that have, since passed away, like many of the wrestling legends, and then plus, like we would see each other at these events, but we didn't really get to see each other much after that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I remember like two guys specifically, Sir Oliver Humperdinck and Dr. Death. I met them at FanFest, and like we get to talking, one thing leads to another. And during those first two FanFests, I was actually there as a vendor. So these pretty things on the wall behind me, I would bring some of them and actually have them to sell. And they would come by the table and say, "Oh my God, I was on that show." Like Hump was like, "Oh my God, that's my only appearance on NBC ever. That's our next main event." Or Dr. Death came by and saw I had a Beach Blast '92 poster with him and Gordy against the Steiners. And, you know, I'm not bragging on myself, but I'm so grateful that I did this. I gave them the posters.
Hmm.
And that was like an instant connection. Like I brought it here to make some money off of it, but it's a much bigger deal for me, for you to have it, for just take it, please take it. And they're both so
Right.
appreciative. And I remember Hump actually emailed me a few weeks later and said, "I just want you to thank you again. And I want you to know that poster has a very prominent spot in my house right now."
That's awesome. Yeah, Hump was a nice guy. I remember at one of the fan fests being a part of a group that went to dinner with him at like Applebee's or somewhere, and he was just, cool, down to earth guy, and Doc was super nice, and I think we might have gotten to see his last match because I know he wrestled Butch Reed at one of those fan fests, and I don't remember him having another match before he passed away. I mean, it was possible, but he had already been, sick with cancer at that point, and had the throat box thing, I think, going on.
Yeah,
So we may have seen his last match.
I hadn't even considered that.
Yeah. So in that time that we've known each other, like we've both gotten like much more involved in like aspects of wrestling, different aspects. Obviously, I became a wrestler later
Just
on, but
so cool. So cool. I'm living vicariously through you.
yeah, yeah, it was. I'm on a sabbatical right now, but yeah, just being able to say that I did it, and I did it for quite a while, and teamed with Ricky Morton. That's always something I'll never forget. Uh, but I wanted to talk about you because I remember when I knew about you. It would have been before we met because of the website, the history of WWE.com.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then like since then, it just kind of blew up. Like you started writing books, and you would get name dropped everywhere. Like I was watching a timeline video from High Spots the other week, and it was like special thanks to Graham Cawthon, because everybody references your books. Tell us a little bit about history of WWE.com and some of the books and work that you've put out there.
Well, the website launched in 2002, early 2002, and it came from basically me. I took a year off college and I was working full time, and I was in an area where I had no friends because I just hadn't been in that area very long. And I would come home from work and I would go, I would dig through some of the old wrestling magazines that I had, which weren't many at that point. And I would go, there's got to be a spot somewhere on the internet where all of these old house shows exist, where you can find out, where Ric Flair was in January of 1987 on any specific day. And I would dig around and there was nothing. There was absolutely nothing. There were a few websites that would have maybe at most you could find two shows a month, but it was really limited. And so I just thought to myself, well, I'll just start doing this for myself. And it started not even as a website. Maybe it started as a Word document somewhere. I started watching full time in '92, as if this can't give it away. But I was thinking, what was going on that year that never made television, that would have blown my mind to have actually seen in person or on a Coliseum video or, yada, yada, yada. So I would focus on those first few years of me being a fan. And then it just grew ahead, grew to the modern day, but also grew back to 1963 with the inception of the WWF. And it was just a constantly evolving project that later expanded to WCW, then 80s Crockett. There was a while there where I was also working on Ring of Honor, on TNA, on Smoky Mountain. So it was just that's one of the reasons I stepped away from it in recent years. Just you cannot maintain that and also, I don't know, exist as a normal human being. And I had a lot of desire to exist as a normal human being. But that's kind of where it came from, the website. And then the books evolved from that. I had a good friend of mine, Grant Sawyer, who worked with me on the books, and he and one of my best friends, Brad Stutz, used to work for an indie in North Carolina. And I go up one weekend to see them, and Grant just says, "Have you ever thought about doing a book?" And I think to myself, well, how many pages are we thinking? Because I don't think I could lift that book. And he and I got to brainstorming a little bit, and it led to 6 books over the span of just a couple of years. And I like to think, and I don't think I'm wrong in saying this, that they got progressively more in depth, progressively more exciting to read, more involvement of wrestlers from that time period, more involvement of fans of that time period, a lot more photos from fans, ticket stubs, personal stories, personal accounts. So it kind of became, it started as just a book of results. And at the end of it, it almost became like some kind of a documentary that you would find on television where, yes, the results are here, but we're also going to share the perspectives of, 50 or 60 other people who experience these things firsthand.
So I have one of your books right here, which you were nice enough to give me back in, I think, the 2014 Fan Fest, possibly. And that may have actually been the last time that we saw each other. Were you at that one?
Yes.
Okay. But this book, like I referenced it a couple of months ago when I was trying to label some of my video files, trying to get dates for the matches. And not only is there like the results and stuff, but you also have like some of the event flyers advertising the shows, and so that's pretty cool because you could only get those from like local newspapers and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's one thing, not to cut you off, but that was the third book. So that's the
mm,
first book that I started experimenting on. Like, well, let's add a little bit more. Let's not just do the results. Let's, put you in that time frame.
mhm. I remember much like you, like I in the early 90s I would get the magazines on the newsstands and I would always flip to the back where they had the arena results. And people today may not realize this, but back then a lot of the good stuff was not on television, and we didn't know about these matches and shows that took place until we read the wrestling magazines, which came out several months after the fact. And I remember as a kid, I had a scrapbook I would keep, and I would cut out like some of the shows, like some of the results, and I would paste it. Did you do the same thing?
I would keep them in a little Ziploc bag, like a total shut-in nerd 12-year-old. Like I'm carrying around my little Ziploc bag.
Yeah, yeah, and I had my little sticky notes and my little scrapbook, and uh so it was like it was you're opening a new world. You get to find out all this stuff that you didn't know about, and people today really wouldn't be able to experience that because everything is televised and recorded.
Well, there's that, but also, back when I started working on the website, there was so much misinformation out there because you had nothing to fact check. So
Hmm.
if I wanted to put something on the internet that said, so and so beat Ric Flair in this town, but then they never recognized the title change, who could say you're wrong?
Right.
and then that was really a motivation early on for me to make my information visible to the world, because there are so many rumors, so many half truths or mistruths or just innuendo. It's completely wrong. And I'd like to think that over the past 20 years, a lot of that has gone away.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that, having books like the ones you put out for reference, with the internet, you don't have that physical print, but you can always, like I mentioned, we're going to talk about some shows today that I used your website to find the results of to kind of jog some memories. But having these books is cool because you could just thumb through it and it's there forever. Like if you have a copy, you could just flum through and you wonder what happened in March of 1986 or February of 1994, or maybe you remember like the first show you went to, but you don't remember all the results. They're such great resources to have.
I agree. Just thinking about the shows that I've been to over the years, I've forgotten half of what happened. And just in the past couple of days, reading back, I had no idea of the people that I never knew I saw live, but I actually did.
Yeah, same. When I was going through the results for some of the shows we're going to talk about, there were matches I had no remembrance of taking place. Like one of them was like, Barry Windham defeated Greg Valentine, and I'm sure Greg was happy about that. Inside joke.
Greg never loses.
Right. Uh, but I was a big Barry Windham fan, and like just seeing that on paper, I don't remember it at all, but I'm sure I would have enjoyed it at the time, especially with Barry getting the W, much to Greg's chagrin. I'll let you start us off by telling us kind of some shows that you remember going to, and maybe some of your favorite memories.
Well, since this is a special occasion, I did some digging. That's a lie. I didn't have to do any digging. This is readily available. Um, let's see if you can see this at all. You see that?
Yeah, Shawn Michaels.
That's right. This is from my first ever wrestling show. This is May 1st, 1993, at the Cap Center, Landover, Maryland. I was 11 years old. I had just seen my first live pay per view. Do you see Kurt?
Oh yeah. I see him now.
Okay. I had just seen my first live pay per view, WrestleMania 9. About a week later, my dad comes home from work. Sean had just hit him with the belt, by the way. My dad
Gotcha.
comes home from work and it says, "How would I've got tickets? I've got tickets for the show at the Cap Center," and I freaked out. I absolutely freaked out. The main event was Bret Hart and Lex Luger. Bret was absolutely my guy. Uh, Sean and Perfect were the sub main event. See what else happened. I'm not going to go over the whole card, but I would like to talk about the highlights. So this is really interesting. During intermission, um, I'm guessing it was Finkel, announced that they would be back the next month at the Baltimore Arena, and this would have been King of the Ring weekend. So the weekend of the first King of the Ring, like Friday or Saturday. And these are the two matches that they announced: Razor Ramon against Shawn Michaels. They're both heels. Bret Hart against Bob Backlund. They're both baby faces.
Right.
And that was so captivating. And so I got Bret Hart sunglasses for $6. I remember that they were only $6. I later had to get another pair like 10 years ago that were $100, but it was still worth it. It was the Smoking Guns first weekend on the road. So they subbed for the Nasty Boys against the Head Shrinkers. I really wanted to see the Nasty Boys against the Head Shrinkers. But I remember being really quiet. I remember just taking it all in, not really emoting to a whole lot, not really cheering for a whole many people. I remember I cheered for Bret and I cheered for Hacksaw Jim Duggan against Yokozuna, and that was it. I was just taking it all in. It was a matinee, and then after the show, me and my parents are going back to the car, and we hear, "Oh, the wrestlers are leaving over here." Okay. I mean, it's like 5 o'clock. Let's hang around. Remember how I said Razor and Sean were going to wrestle the next month in Baltimore? Okay. Guess who
Were
I
they
see?
getting in a car together?
Guess who I see leaving together? And Razor is carrying Sean's bags.
Oh wow.
And so I'm sitting there. I'm 11 years old. I'm looking over the railing down because it was kind of like a tunnel that they would walk out of to their parking lot. And I'm going in my head. I'm going, why isn't Razor beating the tar out of Shawn Michaels right now? That I don't understand. So that was
Right.
my first show. That was my first show.
Awesome. Awesome.
But also they were laying the seeds during this show for Razor's babyface turn. So the main event is Brett and Luger, and at the finish is Sharpshooter. Razor Ramon comes out, so they double team Brett. Razor holds Brett. Luger runs. Brett moves. He knocks out Razor with the forearm. So they were already right there setting up Razor for a babyface turn.
You said that was May of '93, right?
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
it was 2 weeks before the 1-2-3 Kid win.
Yeah, because I was thinking, I remember he wrestled DiBiase at SummerSlam a few months later, and he was already a babyface. So this was pretty close to when he turned babyface, like you said.
They knew it was coming. I think even before Mania, they knew it was coming. So they were just beating him down as a heel to then build him back up as a babyface.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I uh I pulled off the results of the first show that I can remember going to. So I have this memory, and I don't know if it's correct or not, but I feel like I saw an independent show in Falls City, Nebraska that Bruiser Brody was on and was like fighting in the crowd. I could be completely full of shit about this, but I feel like when I was like 6 years old that this happened, but I have no proof of it. So if anybody out there has a history of fallscitynebraska.com website, uh, feel free to chime in. But
Now, not
anyway,
to cut you off, but there's probably a few people in that town of Nebraska that look like Bruiser Brody. So it could be
probably.
anyone.
Yeah, it could be anyone. Maybe it was John Nord that I saw, and I just wanted it to be Bruiser Brody. All right, so the first major event that I can recall was on August 24th, 1988, at the Civic Arena in St. Joseph, Missouri. It was a WWF show, and the headliner was Brutus Beefcake defeats Hercules, and the Killer Bees defeated the Young Stallions in a face versus face tag match.
Mm-hmm.
Junkyard Dog defeated One Man Gang by disqualification. And then there was a midget tag. Sensational Sherry beat Rockin' Robin. And oddly enough, one of the things I remember most about this show is Sunny Beach was in the opening match, and he lost to Scott Casey. But for whatever reason, Sunny Beach kind of stayed with me.
What day was that?
August 24th, 1988.
Okay. Here's what I need you to do in post production. I need you to play some intermission music right here.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
All right.
It's funny that you mentioned that.
Are you shitting me?
Same loop.
That's what?
This is the same loop as what
Same
you just
loop. Okay.
described.
Yeah,
Just
I was
days
reading.
before.
Gotcha. I was reading the corner. It said convention center. I thought it was the same night. I'm like, holy crap.
No, but it's
Uh,
the same lineup. Sunny Beach is on here. I'm
wow.
sure he is. I think he actually signed it. I did not get him to sign it. It came signed, but it is signed by Sunny Beach.
What are the odds that you have a poster from that very loop?
So here's the thing. This poster is worthless to me. I have been carrying this poster around for probably 15 years. I've never trashed it. I can't sell it because it's signed by just weird people that no one wants to sign their poster. But then you bring up this hugely memorable occasion for you as a young child. And yeah, I will send this to you.
Wow, man, I appreciate that.
If you really want something like this, I will send this to you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
That's awesome. I can't believe that you have a poster
No
from
one
that
does.
same loop.
No one can believe anyone has a poster from Enid, Oklahoma in August 1988.
So is this how this is going to go? I'm going to start going over a show, and you're going to be like, "I'll be right back."
I mean, there's a chance.
um.
have
All
you ever been
right.
have you ever been to San Jose, California in the early 1990s?
If I would have been, I would have said hello to Manny Fernandez.
Is he from San Jose?
He was originally. I'll tell you how I know he's from San Jose is because someone asked Dave Meltzer a year or two ago, like they said, is Bailey the best wrestler to ever come from San Jose? And he says, no, Manny Fernandez is. And that's how I remember that.
Okay.
So I would have assumed he's from like El Paso or something, but apparently he's from San Jose originally.
Well, I just learned in recent years that he lived in Shelby, North Carolina for many years, which is where you and I saw where the Rock and Roll Express won the NWA Tag Team titles.
Yeah, that was a really cool moment. We went to the actual was it the Shelby Rec Center? Is that what it's
Mm-hmm.
called?
Mm-hmm.
And I still have the picture of us outside the building doing the little pose. And I mean, who would have thought? Because I've never, obviously I've lived in Missouri most of my life or Nebraska, Midwest, but I got to visit where the Rock and Roll Express won their first NWA World Tag Team titles.
And I can't tell you among wrestling fans how often that comes up, and only that comes up when it comes to Shelby, North Carolina. Like nothing
Yeah,
else in the history of time ever happened there. But I love, not to segue too much, but I love watching these old episodes of Worldwide or NWA Pro or whatever, and from as far back as '83, and trying to figure out, is that the Rex? Yep, there's the stage. That's the Rec Center.
I've noticed that before. Like I think I've seen it like on Twitter or something where you can recognize all of those like little Crockett syndicated tapings like where they took place.
They're hard.
Um,
Some of them are hard. Spartanburg is easy because there's the balcony. Shelby can be easy because there's usually a basketball court or a basketball net that they folded up, and then there's the stage. But some of them are just damn difficult, especially if they didn't use that town very often.
right.
Right.
I can recognize the easy ones like Charlotte and Greensboro and ones like that. But if you were
You
like,
mean major arena?
yeah, but if it was like Rock Hill, South Carolina, like I wouldn't be able to recognize it. All right, I just switched mics, everybody. So we're going over some of the old arena shows that we went to, and um, yeah, why don't we just kind of take turns? Like, you've done a show, I've done a show, and we'll just kind of go back and forth. So that would put you up next.
Okay. I'm not gonna do every show. It's just it would keep us up both all night. But I'll hit some highlights. So the first show, the pictures I showed you, that was May '93 at the Cap Center. I went back 2 months later. It was largely the same selling points. It was supposed to be Hogan and Yoko, but Hogan's gone, so they replaced him with Brett. So that those two were my only live events for the next 9 years because I moved around too much. Um, I moved. This was Metro DC, so I moved from Metro DC right before Survivor Series '95, which was at the Cap Center.
Uh,
Yeah. And then I moved to Panhandle, Florida, so like Panama City area. Then I moved to Alaska during the Monday Night War when no one was coming to Alaska, even one show a year. They weren't even doing that. So my next show is actually in Baltimore, and that's April 2002, shortly after WrestleMania with Rock and Hogan. Um, Nothing really amazing about it, but I was just so psyched. It was my first trip to Baltimore, and I liked Baltimore so much I wrote a book about it. Um, it was my first trip to the Baltimore Arena, which we all know is like a hugely legendary wrestling venue, which is still there, even though it's a big pile of dump, and it always has been a big pile of dump. It's still there. But I got to see one of Randy Orton's first matches on the as part of the tour for SmackDown. A very young Randy Orton against Hardcore Holly. Got to see Triple H and Chris Jericho. Got to see Kurt Angle against Edge. So it wasn't so much an amazing show. I mean, it was fun, but it was an amazing experience to be back in front of live wrestling and to have a whole bunch of friends go with me and just have a super fun night as young 20 somethings.
Right. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I have never been to Baltimore, but you think of all the legendary shows that I'm sure you covered in your book. You had the Great American Bash 89, 90. Yeah, 91, we can leave that one out. But a lot of great wrestling there. The Crockett Cup in 87 was in Baltimore also. All right, we're back. You were talking about, or we were talking about some of the big shows in Baltimore.
Yeah, I mean, not only the bashes, the pay per views, but also some of the first syndicated shows that the WWF did when they moved out of Poughkeepsie. They did Saturday Night's Main Event. So they were just, it was, I think they did the Saturday Night's Main Event where Andre had the heart attack. So there's so many big moments that maybe you didn't even realize it was Baltimore, and it was Baltimore.
Mhm. Yeah, and I know that there's been other like cities that have had other people release books about them. I know Jim Cornette did the Louisville book, and but you would be the only one that's put out a book for Baltimore, and so uh, especially if you live in the Baltimore area or just like wrestling history, it's a book that people should pick up.
But also, a lot more people live in New York City. So you should get this book too.
Yeah, holy ground.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, you have so many books that I have to see them again to jog my memory.
Only six. Only six. But here are just some of the photos that fans shared.
Awesome. Did you see they were doing a documentary on a Vladimir?
I am so thrilled for him. That made me so happy. Have you met him?
Have I met him?
Mhm.
No.
He he is the most humble, down to earth guy who does not like the attention, which is why you don't see him doing interviews. You've never seen him really be featured anywhere. Um, I met him for the first time at WrestleMania 27 weekend in Atlanta, and um, a funny story. And I know I said earlier I don't want to go into many tangents, but after the Ring of Honor show, the first Ring of Honor show that weekend, a bunch of my friends and I end up at Gladys Knight's Chicken and Waffles for dinner in downtown Atlanta. And it's almost midnight. It's prom night. So almost all the tables are taken. And I'm standing outside and I see Vlad walk by. And Mike Johnson standing right in front of me. And I go, Mike, like I'm trying not to draw attention to myself. Mike, that guy. And he goes, oh, that's Vlad. He's one of my best friends. You've never met him? So if maybe to embarrass me more than anything else, Mike immediately runs over to Vlad, tells on me, and then forces me to sit right next to Vlad during dinner. To which I just pick his brain like the nerdiest nerd you've ever seen.
Nice. I always, as a kid, remember, of course, seeing him at all the WWF events. But funny enough, my most vivid memory is that when Ric Flair beat Sting to regain the title in '91 at the Meadowlands,
Yeah.
when they showed a clip of it on TV, they showed him with a Ric Flair wrestling buddy, and he's like, Ric Flair number one, Ric Flair number one. So for shows that I went, WCW used to run the Civic Arena in St. Joe, Missouri, a lot between 1991 and 92. Um, and so I pulled up the results from your website, and the first show, and I'm not going to go through all of the results, but March 14th of 91, they actually drew very well, 3,400 people for a house show headlined by Ric Flair against Sting, with Elegante as the special referee. So that was the main event, and I'm looking at the card. So we got the opening match: Larry Zbyszko beats Brad Armstrong. I'm pretty sure Brad did a sunset flip over the ropes, and Zbyszko kind of sat on him and held the ropes for the pin. Yeah. Dustin Rhodes defeats Dr. X. One thing I will say, and I've pinpointed as being this show, there is one result actually missing, and that is the Juicer defeated Dutch Mantel. And the reason I've narrowed it down to this show is I remember the Juicer had been off TV for a while. Like, he wasn't around very much in early '91, and him and Dutch were the opening match, and he beat Dutch with a Luthez press off the top rope, which you didn't see too often. But that was actually the opening match. And then Terry Taylor and Z-Man went to a draw. And then here's the really cool, memorable thing about this show. On the syndication bumpers, they would always have like advertise the lineups for the shows. You'd have like Tony Gilliam saying, WCW coming to St. Joseph, Missouri, and here's the lineup, blah, blah, blah. So they advertised that there was a tag team called Wings that was going to be teaming with the Junkyard Dog to wrestle the Freebirds and Dan Spivey. So I'm like, well, who the hell is Wings? You know, because they haven't been on TV. You never heard of them. Mm-hmm. So I go to the show that night, not knowing who they are. Do you know the answer to that question?
It's Owen Hart and Brian Pillman.
Yes. Owen Hart and Flying Brian as Wings. So I'm one of the very few people that actually got to see that tag team that probably only had one, maybe two matches together.
But they had enough matches to have a name.
Yeah. I mean, they had a name apparently before they even had a match together. You know, I was like, who the hell's Wings? And I'm thinking, you know, because Flying Brian was probably fourth from the top babyface at that point, probably just behind Sting, Luger, and the Steiners. Mm-hmm. So I was surprised that they didn't want to just advertise that Flying Brian would be there. Instead, it was just Wings, you know?
Maybe they had the name before they knew who was in the team.
Maybe. They probably were like, well, if we can't get Pillman and Owen, maybe we'll get, you know, Tim Horner and Alan Iron Eagle or something, you know? But I always thought that was really cool. And then I see Barry Windham beat Rick Steiner. I remember that because he held him up like an atomic drop and dropped him crotch first on the ropes. And that's how I remember him winning that match. And then Ron Simmons defeated Butch Reed. This was right after Doom had their breakup. And the thing I remember about this match is Butch was on his way to the ring, and he's the heel. And for whatever reason, it's almost like he momentarily forgot that he was a heel. And he high-fived this fan that was sticking their hand out. And it was like you could just see him like remember, oh, wait, I shouldn't have done that. And so after he high-fives this guy, he turns around and starts like being all heel to him and like jawing off at him and stuff. So, but that's just kind of a funny memory. And then...
Wouldn't it kind of be his hometown crowd?
What's that?
Wouldn't it kind of be his hometown crowd?
Yeah, because Butch was from the Kansas City area, and he wrestled in St. Joe for Central States, you know, in the 80s as well. So yeah, he would have been, you know, well known in this area. So he may have actually knew the guy. Who knows?
He may have walked out thinking, I am babyface in this
town. Yeah. Unfortunately, he still lost to Ron Simmons, so it wasn't enough to pick up the win. And then later that year, this was the coolest thing. August 5th, 1991, WCW held a television taping, and I had never been to a TV taping. And so they had advertised this lineup, and most of the matches didn't even take place. But the key things that people would remember was this is the show where Abdullah the Butcher comes out of the box and attack Sting. So he was making his return to WCW. So that was just kind of a cool thing that happened. And then there was one title change where the Z-Man, Big Josh, and Dustin Rhodes defeated the Freebirds and Bad Street to win the six-man tag team titles. So those were kind of the most newsworthy things coming out of there.
And the day before, I turned 10.
You turned 10 the day before?
Yep.
Gotcha. So I'm about a year older than you then, if that's the case, because I was 11 at this time. Uh, the worst part about this TV taping is, I'm sure you remember the Patriots, Firebreaker Chip and Todd Champion.
I do. While you're talking about the Patriots, I actually have to drink alcohol. Like, that's how bad the Patriots were. So if you don't mind, I'll pour. You talk.
Right. So there had been nothing about the Patriots on TV. This was their debut taping. There had been no vignettes or anything like that. So all of a sudden, here comes a new tag team called the Patriots, and they have a squash match. So it's like, okay, whatever, new tag team. Well, here's what sucked, is they did 3 squash matches on this one taping. And by that third match, we were just so sick of seeing the Patriots. It was like torture, Like, we'd never seen these guys, and all of a sudden they're like half the taping. And then we had to, suffer through them in WCW, unfortunately, for the next 6 to 8 months. So, but it was cool because this is when I first got to meet Ricky Morton. He had just turned heel and was doing the York Foundation thing. He had rode to the show with Teddy Long and Junkyard Dog and Nick Patrick. And we got to meet Ron Simmons and Diamond Stud and Johnny B. Bad. I remember one of my friends was so excited, he ran up to one of the wrestlers and knocked the camera out of my hand that I had. And keep in mind, I'm 11 years old, and Ron Simmons actually fixed my camera for me, which was pretty cool. And I had pictures with all of these guys, but it was 30 years ago, so unfortunately I don't have any of them except the Ricky one I made sure to keep. But that was really cool to do the television taping. And then they continued to come here to St. Joe in 92, and I got some of those results. And just this is when the Dangerous Alliance was doing the big feud with Sting and those guys. Really fun times. And I found your one of your results was from March 22nd of 92 in St. Joe, Missouri. And the only result you had listed was Cactus Jack defeats Z-Man, which he did. But I wanted to add a couple of things to that I do remember from that show. One of them was one of my favorite house show matches of that era that I was going to. And the reason I've been able to narrow it down to this event that it took place on is because it involved Vader. And in all of the other St. Joe shows, he was wrestling different guys according to your website. So I know that it would have to be this show, and the timeline is what I would remember as well. So Vader wrestled Brad Armstrong. And of course, Vader won. This was kind of like a maybe 3rd, 4th match on the card. He wasn't quite getting his main event push yet. This was around the time that he was with Harley Race and teaming with Mr. Hughes sometimes. So him and Brad Armstrong come out, and you'd seen Vader squash all these guys before, and you kind of expected Brad would be another guy that he would run through fairly quickly. And he gave Brad a lot. Brad was got a lot of offense. They were fighting out of the ring. I remember I had a picture of Brad jumping off the apron with a fist to Vader, and they had a really kind of cool competitive match that I don't know if you ever saw their worldwide match they had years later in 94, which was actually a really good TV match. But this was kind of similar, where Brad just took the fight right to him, and it was a pretty good match. And the other thing I would say is, I don't remember the exact particulars, but just to fill in some of the missing results, the main event was you had the Dangerous Alliance, all 5 of them, against Sting, Steamboat, and then some combination of either the Steiners and Wyndham and Dustin, like some combination of that. And I don't remember all of the particulars. I know the Babyfaces won, but I remember that was also a
That one of
part of
those
that show.
matches, was that one of those matches where Dusty was tied to Paulie?
No, no, unfortunately not. It was just a straight like 10-man tag main event. I remember it being really good because the Dangerous Alliance were really hot at the time, and you had, Rick Rude, like he would take that atomic drop and, stick his butt out, and everyone just loved that, and those were just really, really good matches at the time. WCW continued to come to St. Joe, but it seemed like they were drawing less and less each time. As a kid, I didn't recognize this, but according to your website, which lists the attendance, it's clear that they're dropping attendance each time that they come. Whereas they started with like 3,400, now it's like 1,700 and 1,100. And uh, one of the cool matches on these shows was, where's the date? May 8th of '92, and what I loved about this is I got to see the Great Muta live. He teamed with Nikita Koloff, and they wrestled Vader and Rick Rude, and they won by disqualification. And
You saw a
go on.
Battle Bowl show.
What's that?
You saw a Battle Bowl show because that match makes no sense.
It was, it's funny because I guess this probably would have been around the time that Muta came in and had that 2 out of 3 fall match with Brad Armstrong on TV.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think he was doing anything much else as far as that goes.
He did.
Um, he was at the.
Like he did. I know he worked the Omni that week or two. He worked a few other shows too, but yeah, nothing big on television.
Yeah, I know he was at the Omni show where Vader lost the title to Simmons because he wrestled Scott Steiner.
Baltimore.
Baltimore, yeah, yeah.
But that would have been August, so that would have been.
Yeah, yeah, that would have been several months after this. But what I remember about this match is Muta threw some just really awesome drop kicks that like just stood out at the time, and he just like he was the highlight of the show as far as I was concerned. And I actually met him before the show, and I got him to autograph just a plain piece of paper, which of course I lost over the years, unfortunately. But I was 12. And then the final WCW show of kind of that 2-year run was November 21st, 1992, and you have their attendance listed as 968. So it had gone down considerably. And this show was headlined by Ron Simmons and Too Cold Scorpio defeating Vader and the Barbarian. So it was a good run of shows and some good memories.
So are all those the shows that you went to, or just St. Joe?
So I didn't. After that one in November '92, they stopped coming to St. Joe. And the next show I actually got to go to for the big two companies or any company really was January 31st of 1997. So this was during the Monday Night Wars era when WCW came to Kansas City at Memorial Hall, and they had like just an absolute shit lineup. Uh, they sold out the Memorial Hall. Which is I think like 3,000 people, something like that, 3,500. But the lineup was just atrocious. Now remember January '97, they had all of this talent, right? So the opening match was the Renegade defeated Terry Taylor. And so Taylor wasn't even wrestling for WCW at the time, but this was like a skeleton crew show, right? They went 20 minutes as the opener. And, I was a big Terry Taylor fan, and here I am watching them have to wrestle Renegade for 20 minutes and put over Renegade. So, yeah, it was not a good way to start the event. And then we had.
It's already that it's all about momentum. So I guarantee you, whatever that November, like the November '92 show that you just talked about, that drew less than 1,000 people, I guarantee you there was more talent on that show than is on the show that you're going to talk about right now, but it drew 3 times as many people.
Oh, absolutely. And basically, I remember going to this show and people cared about the NWO. They were even though Hall and Nash were not on this show, that was what they cared about. But WCW was so hot at the time that they came to this show with no real lineup in place. And so check out this next match. We got Six and Vincent defeated High Voltage.
One of those people was over.
Yeah. And the only match that kind of sounds all right, I got Alex Wright defeated Lord Steven Regal. So that's, whatever. Jeff Jarrett defeated Big Bubba. And then in the main event, Lex Luger and the Giant defeated the Faces of Fear.
You just watched an episode of Worldwide.
Right. The only thing that was missing was Doc Dean. And I remember like Luger wrestled solo the whole match. Like it was a 2-on-1 match, and then Giant just came out at the end, and they the faces went over. And I remember we got to meet Mark Curtis, Brian Hildebrand before the show, and he was really nice, but it was just an atrocious lineup. And then so my only WWF show that I went to that era was that following summer, August or April, I guess it was spring, April 26th of 97, for another terrible show, but better than the WCW show, because at least we got a Steve Austin Owen Hart match that went like 3 minutes, but it was like really good stuff while it lasted. The main event was Undertaker against Davey Boy, but otherwise, Flash Funk defeated the Brooklyn Brawler. And yeah, The Rock was on the show. He defeated Rockabilly. And yeah, nothing else really worth talking about.
Is it my turn?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So, June 2002, and I'm not going to go through every single show, but there are a few that stand out. And in June 2002, I go to a show in Washington, D.C. For the first time ever, and I think really the only time ever, I saw Hulk Hogan wrestle live. And that was pretty cool. I saw Hogan and Taker. That was the main event. Taker was champion. Taker won. I saw Eddie Guerrero against Rob Van Dam. And I saw Brock Lesnar against Ric Flair. And I don't really remember, like the rest of the show is not memorable at all. But those 3 matches, for very different reasons, are super memorable. So a year later, I'm in Roanoke, Virginia. I'm going to college not far away from there. And Roanoke would get shows a couple times a year from the WWF or WWE. The first show I went to, April 2003, really there was nothing super cool about it, but it was Shawn Michaels' first house show match in 5 years, I think. Kevin Nash was back as Diesel, or at least that's how he was advertised, as Diesel. A few months later, like 6 months later in September, same city, same arena, saw Brock and Kurt Angle go 40 minutes right before their Iron Man match on SmackDown. So that was really cool. That was a great experience. That whole show was really neat too, because it was Brock and Angle. The U.S. title was Eddie Guerrero, John Cena. I think it was John Cena and Benoit. So it was a 3-way. Maybe Rhino was in there too, but I don't remember that part. But it was at least a 3-way. It was with the 3 like top mid card guys in the company. You had Team Angle against the APA. Paul London's first weekend on the road, got to see him and Spanky as a tag team. Um, so that was pretty much the college years. And then now that I'm a young professional, I have a full time job. I can spend money and go to wrestling shows whenever I want to. I lived outside the Charlotte area, and so that was really fortunate because you would get shows in Charlotte, you would get shows in Greenville, you would get shows in Asheville, you would get shows in Spartanburg. So the next few years, I got to see a Raw house show in Asheville with and I had almost no memory of this until I looked at it the other day. There was and this is January of '06. This was 7 days before the Royal Rumble, and they snuck in an OVW match on the card between Brent Albright and hold on, I'll tell you everything. Aaron Stevens, which would have been Damian Sandow, and he had Beth Phoenix and Shelly Martinez in his corner. Like none of these people had been on television or had been on national television. They just kind of snuck them in the card. So that was really neat. And then in September of '06, in Spartanburg, South Carolina, which was, we were talking about a big Crockett venue back in the day, they ran an ECW house show. Yeah, I know it's WWE ECW, but their house shows, like the first few months that they were allowed to do house shows, an amazing experience. So much value for the dollar. I sat front row for like $30, right? Sandman and Tommy Dreamer entered through the crowd. I got to slap hands with CM Punk. I got to slap hands with Rob Van Dam. Francine came in for a shot. I got to see, this was a match on the show I have zero recollection of. Little Guido and Tony Mamaluke against Derek Neikirk and Ryan O'Reilly. Got to see Big Show with Paul Heyman. So it was really experimental. And I hate that they gave that up because it was so much fun. It was so cheap. And you really walked out of there feeling like, yeah, that was totally worth it. And I would go to another one.
I actually went to a WWE ECW show as well, a house show. Do you remember the fan fest that they had in Rockville, Maryland back in '07?
Okay.
Right. Okay. I went with my friend Aaron Holman, who lives in Ohio, and he had found out about an ECW house show that was going to happen, and I don't remember what town it was in. Like he would be able to remember this stuff, but I don't. But on the way back from Rockville, we stopped some other town for an ECW house show, and what I remember is the main event was the Big Show against Sabu, and CM Punk wrestled Stevie Richards. And I remember Kevin Thorne was on the card. And I don't remember who else, but I remember it was like just a kind of a short and sweet house show, maybe 2 hours in length, kind of easy to watch. And even though I hated the WWE version of ECW and I think it was blasphemy, I did enjoy this particular event.
Doesn't that speak volumes that you hated the television product, but you enjoyed the live show?
Well, I think this may have been before they really watered it down so much because, at first they really were using some of the ECW guys, and then it became, well, let's, Bobby Lashley and the Pope and all these guys, and the ECW guys were just largely used to put them over. And I remember the first show they had like the Sandman against a zombie because they thought that's what ECW was. Like, well, let's just give him a weird gimmick and he hits him with the cane, but it didn't capture the heart of ECW. Now the one night stand shows, like the first couple ones did, like those were great. But yeah, I did enjoy the ECW house show, but the TV show not so much.
But I really think that they had something good going there. Maybe they did, but also something to consider. They were running venues that they would never send the main roster to because they were too small. So they could have the main roster do, the Garden or, the big venues, but then the small towns that never got the WWE product, that would be a great way to make some extra money. That's just me,
Hmm.
but I thought that was a missed opportunity.
I do recall that this particular ECW show was in a smaller venue, and they were not anywhere near capacity. Like it maybe drew 1,000 people. Yeah, but yeah, it definitely felt like a test run, like they were trying it out. So, do you have more shows you want to talk about, or do you want to move on to merch?
Let me scan through these. Really, what I've been talking about are me in different phases. So it's me as a new fan where everything is just overwhelming and amazing. And even if it's awful, I have very distinct memories of it. And then me as a 20 something where I'm either in college or I have money where I never had money before. So it's just something to do. And then now I'm kind of settled a little bit and I'm not going to as many shows, and the shows I'm going to aren't as memorable because I've already been to 3 dozen shows. So 2009 in Asheville, I'm seeing Cena and Orton. 2011 in Greenville, South Carolina, I'm seeing Cena and Miz. Uh, and then I moved to outside of Savannah, and they're maybe getting a show once a year. So I get to see AJ and versus Roman versus Seth as a main event. The next year, I get to see Seth and Roman against Drew and Dolph Ziggler. I got to see Ronda Rousey live. But by then, and even now, it's just you can't recapture the magic that you had when you were 11 years old, going to your first handful of shows, and everything was amazing. And these people weren't people. These people were superheroes. And now I'm a grown ass man, and I know these people are just people, and they're
Hmm.
not as unapproachable as they were when I was a kid. They're not as untouchable as they were when I was a kid. Um, I don't have to stay for the main event if I know if I have an early start the next morning. All these your priorities change.
Hmm.
But looking at the long list of shows that I've been to, it's it's the first half dozen that I will always remember, and the last half dozen I can barely remember.
Yeah, yeah. I've gone to very little amount of shows over the last 10 years, and but those like early 90s WCW house shows are the ones that'll really stick with me. I remember just the feeling of walking in and seeing the ring setup, and it was beautiful. And there was no pyro, there was no fancy entryway. There was just a blue curtain, red curtain, but just seeing the ring was just like magic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's similar when I think about the pay per views I've been to, because I've done maybe a half dozen WrestleManias at this point. But I can tell you, like the moment that I walked, the first one that I went to, WrestleMania 20 in New York City, I can remember walking into Madison Square Garden. I can remember just like chills and looking up and seeing the top of the building that we all know so well from dozens of historic broadcasts. Like that is seared into me. The
Hmm.
last one I went to, which would have been 34, it was a fun weekend, but the show itself isn't that memorable.
Right.
So it's just something, and I can't wait to go to Dallas. I can't wait to go to Los Angeles. But it's not about the show. It's more about hanging out with friends all weekend that I don't get to see every day.
Right. Yeah, that's a big part of it. Like just going back to the fan fests and like, we would go there and see all these legendary wrestlers, but it was really the friendships that we made and these connections that we never would have met each other otherwise. I mean, I think some of us had kind of connected on some message boards, but as far as like, just hanging out, like I remember just going to eat with you places and that never would have happened without those events.
I am so happy that that was a thing, that all of a sudden popped up. I remember, this would be in January 2004, the first one, Super Bowl weekend, and I knew that I was going to WrestleMania 20 a few months later. But all of a sudden, I hear from a friend of mine, "Wait, there's like this giant wrestling convention in Charlotte, which is a few hours away. You want to go?" Yeah, these are things I didn't even know this was a thing. What do I bring? They sign things. I have nothing for them to sign. Obviously, that's changed, right? But
Right.
at that moment, that was ended up being a life changing thing. That just a year and a half later after that, I meet you. I meet a half dozen other people that I'm really good friends with to this day, and I think that really got the ball rolling on lots of things.
Yeah. I thought it'd be cool if, because I on these streams I can get like tons of people on there. I thought it'd be fun if like one time we just kind of got everybody on the same chat and we kind of reminisced about those fan fest days.
Yes, that would be amazing. I would love that.
Awesome. I'll have to set that up sometime.
But you got to do it at a time where Michael's actually awake,
You know,
because
I had enough problems connecting with you when you're on Eastern time instead of Central time. So I don't know about Michael because he's in the UK, right?
yeah, yeah. So that's like a 5 or 6 hour time zone difference. So we'll
Yeah,
we'll just have to do it on like a random Sunday where we're all home and we can get up at whatever time to accommodate him, because I really think that if he has some Tabasco sauce or some whatever it was. Did we ever tell you what we did that weekend in '05?
no,
So you don't know the Hoot? I think it was Hooters, the Hooters story.
I do not, but I may have. I was at one of the Hooters gatherings, but I don't know which fan fest it would have been.
Okay, so this was well, this was not a Hooters gathering. This was '05. This was after FanFest, and we're all still in Charlotte. It's me. It's Aaron. Do you remember Aaron?
Yeah,
Oh,
Philip Smeltzer.
yes, yes. It's Michael, who I just met that weekend, and he had the craziest looking hair. He looks scary as hell. If he was on the call right now, I would say the same thing. It was some of the guy who was driving us. It was Jeff Locher. So it was all like five of us. And we're like, we're still in Charlotte. SummerSlam is airing tonight. We have to find a place in Charlotte that is showing it, like a bar or a restaurant or something. So we hop in this guy's van and we are driving all over Charlotte trying to find a restaurant or a bar or something that will show SummerSlam. And we're just driving and driving. It's past 8 o'clock. Like the show started. It's past 9 o'clock. Like, come on, let's find something. We pull up to a Hooters. They are clearly showing it because we can see it from the car. So we run inside and they say, we can't see you. It is packed. Okay. So then we stand outside and we watch the main event, because that is how long we've been driving around Charlotte. We watched the main event from standing outside of Hooters. And then as people are leaving, we are asking them who won certain matches.
Wow.
So after
Wow.
that, after that, Hooters is shutting down. We're hungry. So we go next door to IHOP. And at this point, we are all punch drunk. We
Mhm.
are just out of it. And so we all sit down at a table. There's no one else in this IHOP. This poor waitress had to deal with our loony asses, Michael doing his Nikita Koloff impressions about putting Texas Pete on his pancakes and his syrup and stirring it all around, and then he transitions into doing Dusty impressions. It was just like that just made the weekend more legendary.
Awesome. Yeah, that's why we should all get together and just kind of reminisce on them fun times.
I will buy some Texas Pete just for that podcast, just so I can hold up and say we all remember.
Awesome. All right. That's going to end it for part 1 of my podcast with Graham Cawthon. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Part 2 will be dropping very shortly, so stay tuned.